In this video, I'll show you how I work with Airtable in make.com. Airtable is a table-oriented development environment that lets me create small apps. And at first glance, it might look like a Google sheet, but there are actually some significant differences. I don't want to go into too much detail right now, just maybe mention 2 or 3 really important things. You can also display the elements, the content here, in the form of a dialogue. I can have one-to-many relationships. The columns have clear data types, for example, a long text here or a URL here. And if I scroll a bit further to the right, things like attachments and so on. At Pickert, we've been dealing with quality and process optimization for over 40 years. With automated processes, you relieve your company of routine tasks, have much less manual work, and can focus more on your core business and value creation. If you want to know more, just book a call with me. You'll find the link below in the description. Each row can be uniquely identified with a so-called record ID. And this record ID comes into play again and again when we work with Airtable in Make. The first example I have here is that I use a search records module. And to connect the modules, as usual, I need a connection. With Airtable, I can also create an OAuth connection. You probably know this. When I select it, a window pops up and I have to confirm there that I allow access. Then I select the base. So these are the different tables that exist in the system, so to speak, or databases, as might be a better term. Then within that, the table I want to work with, which can also be sorted. Then I can restrict which fields I actually want to receive in the result. And this here is what I use for the search. Namely, I specify which column and which content in the column I want to search for. Specifically, blog status. I do that with the curly brackets and then this specific content. And I'll show you that again here. If I go over to this table here, then I have this blog status column, which is a drop-down list. And if I set it to create block and run it now, then I should actually get this row as a result. Yes, let's go ahead and run it now. I'll just click run this module only here and look at that. It actually works. And now I have all the contents from this table right here. Another function that I use very often is update result. And in this specific case, I'm creating all sorts of different content here in my content machine, and I want to write that back into the table. So that's what I use update result for. And here, of course, you select the same base again. And now this is where the record ID comes into play, the ID that I got through search records. That's exactly this one here. And then all the columns in this table are displayed here, and I can enter the corresponding results into these columns, into these cells, which are addressed only for this row, for this record ID. So any results that I have produced here, or a folder link, a picture, or whatever else we might have. What's also pretty cool is that if I have drop-down fields here, then if I turn off the mapping, I can actually see the specific contents here. That means I don't have to make a typo here. I can just select the entry directly. And when I execute it, the data in the table is updated accordingly. The third function that I use very often can be seen here in this other scenario. Specifically, when I trigger a scenario via a webhook, which means the scenario waits until it's triggered externally. Then in that case, I want to use this webhook to specifically target a particular row in the data. And I do this as follows. In my Airtable, I have a column somewhere at the end called post socials. And this column is of the type button. And here I enter the webhook. So I see this webhook address there. And then with a question mark, which signals parameters are coming now, the record ID, that's the name, and then I can use this Airtable function to actually append the record ID there as well. That means that when I click this button here, the record ID from this row is sent to my scenario via the webhook. Yeah, and we can just try that out now. I just need to move myself to the side. I'll add a filter here. Oh, I already have one, so that the scenario doesn't keep running here. I always do it like this. I say 1 equals 0, and then it naturally stops at that point. Yeah, and to start it now, I obviously have to click run here. Now we can see that the webhook is waiting for a request here. And if I click this now, theoretically, this webhook should be triggered. We can already see it. There it is. And here in the result, we can now see that the record ID was passed along. And that's why I can then use the getARecord function again with the same table. I can use the record ID here to load the contents of the table. So, and then there's a special feature that I'd like to show using another example. As I mentioned earlier, Airtable can also handle one-to-many relationships. That means, for example, I have a table here, and in this table, I have, say, a blog post, and now I want to generate many tweets for x.com related to this table. Of course, I could just add a lot of columns at the end here, but that doesn't really make sense. For one thing, it would get way too wide. And for another, if I want to change the number of columns or the amount of content, it just wouldn't fit anymore. That's why I simply create a second table here. Yes, and this one is called tweets. And it's just a simple list where I can see tweets, post status, and blog. And that's the record ID of an entry from this table. That means when I've created all these rows for this table, then they are all linked together via this ID. And how do I do that? Add another table like this. I click on plus, then select link to another record, create a new table, and that's how they're connected. And if I now want to make these entries in this table, in this tweets table, then I need this record ID so that I can create the link between the two tables. And I do that by, for example, here now I have to move myself a bit to the side again. Here I generate the tweets, and then I have a loop over the tweets, and then I use the create-a-record function. And with create-a-record, I then select this other table. So not this content table, but this X tweets table. And then I enter the tweet, the status, and the record ID from the other table into this table. And in this way, I've established the connection. Well, and if I actually want to read that again, then here I also do nothing other than use search records and then search in the tweets table for the status new. I send the tweet to X, and in the end, I simply set the status to done. So those were the most important functions for me in how I work with Airtable. And because Airtable is always kind of the control center for many, many scenarios that I build, I think this is a pretty good foundation to get started with. Have fun with it. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. And of course, I'd also love to hear your comments. Thank you. Bye.